Japan's recently elected Prime Minister, General Tojo, whipping up the mighty Nipponese war machine to a fanatical tempo, the year 1942 opened on a dismal note for the Allies. The troops in Malaya, including Australia's doomed 8th Division, hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned, had been pushed back onto the island of Singapore, there to surrender on the 15th of February. Four days later came a blow which rocked our nation, the bombing of Darwin, the first attack on Australian soil. Darwin, an Army, Naval and Air Force base in name but not in strength. A few hundred soldiers, a smattering of ack-ack guns, a handful of obsolete aircraft. At first light that fateful morning, 81 bombers from a carrier force screamed in, followed by 54 land-based planes from the Celebes. By nightfall, on the bottom of Darwin Harbor lay the American destroyer Peary, 2 American transports, a British tanker, and 4 Australian ships. 243 lives and 10 aircraft had been lost. The war was on our northern doorstep. It was a rude awakening to Australians, and Prime Minister John Curtin, courageously defiant to Roosevelt and Churchill, was quick to drive home this significant lesson.
My Lord Mayor, men and women of Australia, for I'm speaking now to everybody in this Commonwealth, wherever he or she may be. The full Cabinet today directed the War Cabinet to gazette the necessary regulations for the complete mobilization and the complete ordering of all the resources, human and material, in this Commonwealth for the defense of this Commonwealth. That means clearly and specifically that every human being in this country is now, whether he or she likes it, at the service of the government to work in the defense of Australia.
The Philippines were in Japanese hands. Tojo was thrusting his trident further south, one prong aimed at Rabaul, the second at Timor, and the third at Balikpapan in oil-rich Dutch Borneo. And to complete the isolation of Java, the final objective on the eastern flank was the New Guinea mainland. The dark cloud of Japanese aggression was spreading unchecked. John Curtin's call to arms echoed throughout the nation. The wheels of industry turned faster. The furnaces and mills at Newcastle were strained to the limit. But the capacity of the plants was hopelessly inadequate. Yet despite these apparent insurmountable hurdles, output climbed. With more raids on Darwin, the need for more planes grew every minute. Almost overnight, the aircraft industry was born and christened #1 priority by the Prime Minister. Beaufort bombers appeared, Pratt & Whitney engines. A full-scale industry was in motion, confounding the expectations of the most optimistic. The northern bombing had sounded a grim warning that any part of our coastline was vulnerable to air attack, that every man, woman and child was likely at any moment to hear the whistle of a falling bomb. It was all hands and the cook and the kids to the task of digging slit trenches and building shelters. Age was no bar to this workforce operating in schools, in playgrounds, in parks and backyards. With the growing demand for more food, those engaged in primary industries were exempted from the forces. But the men on the land were fully aware of the threat of invasion. And so came into being the Volunteer Defense Corps. Bushmen born in the saddle, ready-made snipers, eager to be organized and trained in the tricks of the guerrilla fighter. Willing students of the art of demolition, sabotage, and the mixing of Molotov cocktails. The London Blitz, the Battle of Britain. These early chapters of World War II were filled with the heroic home front exploits of ARP wardens. The ceaseless vigil of plane spotters and fire watchers. The lessons learned from bitter and tragic experience in the motherland were passed on to us. Usherettes in our cinemas were among the thousands who practiced with shovels and sand how to combat incendiary bombs. No uniforms were required. The job could be done even in an evening dress. Who would care about looks in a national emergency? Statistics and research in England proved that in an air raid, glass shattered by bomb blast was as great a danger to life and limb as the missiles themselves. So out came shop windows, and hoardings took their place. Window shoppers were allowed only peepholes. In homes and factories, windows were taped and papered to reduce fragmentation. Tests proved indisputably that the danger of flying glass could be minimized by a backdrop of mosquito net or lace curtain. A necessary nuisance, but an important part in the general scheme of camouflage, which included motor buses. Even dogs had a place in this all-out effect. Any breed was welcome so long as the recruit was big, strong, and healthy. Hundreds answered the call to the canine colors. Trained to obey only one master, they were used as guards patrolling factories, aerodromes, camps, and vital installations. And their efficiency was exceeded only by their savagery. Poochers of peace become dogs of war. Following John Curtin's proclamation, Federal Minister Beasley frankly told of the need for food conservation.
Our job is a vital one, to plan foodstuffs and production for every seaman, airman and soldier, as well as the civilian population throughout Australia, and thus provide for all in the hard times that lie ahead. Any surplus that is available, we will make available to our gallant kinsfolk overseas.
With the three armed forces draining our manpower, the women were not slow to volunteer for part-time duties with the VAD, Voluntary Aid Detachments, and NES, National Emergency Services. Unlike the First World War, this was now a woman's battle too. Firemen stepped up their training and checked equipment to meet the inevitable sequel to an aerial attack. In Queensland, the plan was perfected to use seawater from the Brisbane River. Sydney brigades fought all one night as flames gutted this 5-story factory, and as high winds spread dangerous sparks, more than 100 air raid wardens acted as fire spotters from adjacent rooftops. A disastrous Sydney fire which provided a taste of what could be expected in an air raid. Coastal shipping traffic was never thicker. Ships were never more valuable. So it was a bitter blow when this freighter ran aground after a collision off the New South Wales north coast. A fire and a shipwreck for which the enemy could not be blamed at the opening of 1942. It was an historic day late in March 1942 when General Douglas MacArthur, a worldwide figure renowned for his driving force and brilliance as a leader, arrived in Canberra. The famous American soldier had been ordered out of the Philippines by President Roosevelt. He left Manila Bay in a torpedo boat, accompanied by a few staff officers, his wife and young son, on March 12th, the day of the final capitulation of Java. From Mindanao, the party flew to Darwin and on to the federal capital for the general to take command of the newly defined Southwest Pacific area and to meet Australia's Prime Minister John Curtin for the first time. Convoyed reinforcements of American troops originally bound for the Philippines were diverted to Australia, for parts of New Guinea were already in enemy hands. On May 4th, a Japanese task force sailed from Rabaul to capture Port Moresby, but there was another task force of American and Australian warships in the area. They met in the Coral Sea, and the balance of naval power was restored in the Pacific, and American troops arrived safely in Australia. There welcome could not have been warmer. The Yanks were now talking turkey and eating turkey. The tension brought about by fears of invasion was eased. And the jitters gave way to jitterbugs. Matrons flocked to comfort spun depots, packing thousands of parcels designed to break the monotony of wartime rations and convey a message of encouragement and appreciation to the front from those back home. Enlistments had sadly depleted tram and bus crews, gaps which were quickly filled by younger women. We saw conductresses for the first time, little realizing that they were here to stay. Even tram tickets were welcomed in the collection of waste paper throughout the country. This scrap was to be turned into cardboard for packing food and ammunition. A new sideline in the paper-making industry, which has also stayed with us. Day by day, more jobs were found for women both in and out of the services. They rushed the recruiting depots, following the stirring example set by their sisters in Britain. No job was too tough, too dirty, or too menial. The girls got their first taste of regimented camp life, the trials and tribulations, the rules and regulations. The AWAs and the WAPs were here. They polished the planes. They serviced the guns. They peeled the spuds and cooked the meals. As mechanics and grease monkeys, they showed their skill. From homes, from schools and colleges, from factories and shops, from lives of leisure, they came to play their vital role in the fight for freedom. They lead the way, inspiring other daughters of Australia to become women that matter, women in war. With the influx of American troops, camps sprung up everywhere. Aussies and Yanks joined as a team. In outback areas, rodeos with their laughs, spills and thrills provided a welcome relief to the tough grind of conditioning for the fight. And fight it was in this boxing tourney with a twist. Blind man's Biff. And look at that soft-nosed shillelagh, a tantalizing touch to pep up the punches. Stars of stage and radio played their part in bolstering the morale of the troops. And none was more popular than the inimitable Jack Davy, king of quip and quiz.
Up this way. Right up close. Your name?
Corporal Challen.
Corporal Challen? A nice little question for you, one that I think you'll like. Can you tell me the exact length of the Sydney Harbour Bridge?
1,762 feet, 11 inches in cold weather.
Tell me, that is correct, but how did you know? You have some
well, I was a junior draftsman with the engineers who built it.
Hey, give me my hand.
In the Western Desert, the 9th Division was inspected by the Duke of Gloucester, escorted by their beloved commander, General Leslie Morshead. The Rats of Tobruk. Field Marshal Montgomery. Monty chose the Australians to open the Battle of Alamein. a battle that was to lead finally to the annihilation of Rommel's Africa Corps. In Australia, coastal defense guns were at the ready. The Volunteer Coastal Patrol was formed. Luxury cruisers were trimmed to bare necessities. Little did they know that 5 large, long-range Japanese submarines were lurking off the New South Wales coast, 3 carrying midget 2-man subs and another a spotting aircraft. Launched from just outside Sydney Heads, 5 midget subs sneaked into the harbour undetected until one blew up as it tangled with a boom net. It was 10:30 at night. For months, people in all walks of life had been preparing for just such an emergency. Many rehearsals made it easy for these nurses to slide their tiny charges to underground safety at a children's hospital. Fun for the kids, but the real thing for the nurses. Next morning found the ferry Cuttable a mangled wreck. The second midget sub had got through the net to fire 2 torpedoes at the U.S. cruiser Chicago, moored near Garden Island, narrowly missing her but hitting the depot ship. 19 ratings died. The third midget sub succumbed to depth charges. The bodies of 4 of the Japanese, each under 5 feet tall, were cremated with full naval honors, and the subs were on display. Souvenirs of Sydney's first invasion. In direct opposition to the plans and wishes of Winston Churchill and President Roosevelt, Prime Minister John Curtin, backed to the hilt by his wartime cabinet, had insisted on the return of our Middle East forces to defend Australia, rather than be wasted in a hopeless gesture to save Burma. New Guinea was our front line, the land of the Fuzzy Wuzzy. But even here in the early stages, army leaders clashed bitterly. Demotions, transfers, and changes in leadership bore grim witness to the diversion of ideas offered as to how the Japanese advance could be stemmed, on a battlefield the like of which had never before been experienced. But despite these domestic wrangles, the fight was carried on. It was a saga of suffering and success, of unbelievable examples of courage, determination and endurance, of self-sacrifice and comradeship, of improvisation. The Australian Medical Corps, true to its motto of little by little, performed surgical miracles under these shocking conditions. These were pictures that words could never adequately paint, but which cameramen risked their lives to record on film. An everlasting memorial to those jungle heroes, so many of whom were never to return from that mess of tropical disease, gunfire and mud. Mud, the common enemy of both sides. It slowed up the march and gummed up the guns, until a 27-year-old Wollongong firearms fanatic and brilliant inventor, Evelyn Ernest Owen, came up with an answer. A lightweight submachine gun, sturdy and cheap, immune to mud, capable of firing 800 rounds a minute. The Owen gun, an Australian invention which proved to be the most reliable weapon in all conditions used in World War II. In addition, our shipyards were producing magnificent vessels like this destroyer, the Arunta, seen here on her speed trials. It was a proud day for civilians and servicemen, Australians and Americans, as they watched this cavalcade of armour parading through Melbourne. Weapons of war produced under pressure by Australia's wartime workforce. There was no doubt all Australians were at war. In an endeavour to isolate Australia, the Japanese had pressed south through the Solomons and established themselves on Guadalcanal and neighbouring islands. Valuable intelligence of their moves were provided by gallant members of the Coast Watching Service, who remained in hiding and reported by teleradio. In a disastrous night action off the Solomons, the American Navy suffered a serious setback. Our own cruiser, the Canberra, was lost. Here, mortally wounded, she flashes out her call for aid to rescuing American destroyers. Towards the end of August, the enemy landed on the north side of Milne Bay, opposed by a small force of Australians and Americans. They locked in battle. Losses were staggering on both sides. But the Nips withdrew, their first defeat, and our morale skyrocketed. For the first time, we were able to examine at close range their equipment, or what was left. Their barges, their vehicles, and their dead. Even the currency they planned to circulate when they conquered our country. A plan which was disrupted so effectively at Milne Bay. In this campaign, Queenslander Corporal John French became the first VC winner in the Papuan fighting. Back home, Governor-General Lord Gowrie, VC, congratulates Lieutenant Arthur Cutler, the first artillery officer to win the famous cross. Clive Killer Caldwell, DSO, DFC and Bar, after 20 months in the Middle East and over Britain and France, had brought his Spitfire squadron back to do battle with the Japanese. Bluey Truscott, an effervescent, red-headed young Victorian whose record of human courage, nerve, charm and qualities of leadership made him a national hero. A great Australian fighter pilot, he was later to die on a reconnaissance flight. The deeds of these flyers stimulated the war loan drive. Penny for a plane stamps raised valuable pounds. These youngsters reflected the enthusiasm of their elders as millions poured into the national coffers from savings and bonds to meet the stupendous demand of our wartime budget. General MacArthur, Supreme Commander of the Southwest Pacific, purchased a £1,000 bond, a practical demonstration of his faith in the people of Australia's will to win and the leadership of Prime Minister John Curtin.
For no longer shall this government appeal. It will order and direct. We say, fill the loan. I can say to you that it's nearly half full now, and before the week is out, I ask you Australians to fill this loan as a complete and immediate indication to the enemy that Australia will meet him inch by inch, foot by foot, yard by yard, and that he shall not enter upon our country, that all the advancing that will be done will be by Australians, for it is Australians that stand for the policy of advancing Australia.
A challenge, one which was met by one and all in stirring spirit, of steadily growing determination and confidence, as we came to the close of 1942. A year to remember.